Welcome to the Lovers Lounge podcast, where we talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I am your host, Tina Love, and on this episode, I am talking to, once again, educator, speaker, and author Joan Price. She is back for another part to our episode. Joan, just in case you don't know, calls herself an advocate for ageless sexuality. She has been called other things by the media, quote unquote, senior sexpert, the woman leading a sex revolution for seniors, and her favorite, wrinkly sex kitten. Joan, thank you so much for returning and being on the Lovers Lounge.
I'm so happy to return to the Lovers Lounge.
Yes. Well, we're going to talk about your book because you actually have written a book called Sex After Grief, Navigating Your Sexuality After Losing Your Beloved. And I think I mentioned to you on the last episode that I totally could relate to this. My mother lost my dad in 2014, and they'd been married for 40 something years at that point. And suddenly it was due to cancer, and suddenly she was single and maybe perhaps making a decision as to whether or not she wanted to date again. And I saw your story. You actually lost your husband in 2008 due to cancer.
That's right.
Yeah. So can you
Yes,
tell a little bit about your journey and what happened?
sure. Robert Rice, his name differs from mine by one letter, Rice at Price, was the love of my life. I didn't meet him until I was 57 years old and he was 64. And we only had 7 years together before he died of cancer. But those 7 years, they showed me what love could be, what sex could be, what a relationship could be. It meant everything. And during that time, I switched careers. I had been a health and fitness writer and speaker. And before that, I was a high school English teacher, but that's another story.
Hmm.
And now suddenly all I wanted to do was write and speak about senior sex, thanks to Robert. And so that's what I did. I switched careers, wrote one book, and then one turned into four. And that's how my whole career changed. When he died in 2008, I was in such profound grief
Yeah.
that I could not imagine that I would ever want to be with someone else. It just was unfathomable.
Yeah.
But I also couldn't imagine that I would ever be in a joyful place again, that I would be able to laugh for more than 10 minutes without thinking, oh my God, how could I be laughing? Robert's dead. So it affected everything. And as grief does, as I'm sure you know, and probably many of your listeners do, it wasn't until 10 years after his death that I felt ready to work on a book that I wish I'd had when I was going through it, called Sex After Grief, Navigating Your Sexuality After Losing Your Beloved. And that became my most recent book. I'm very proud of it. It was hard to write. It was also joyful to write. There were times I cried through writing a chapter. There were other times where I danced through writing a chapter, thinking, oh, I'm so glad this book is going to be available for people. I include my grief journey in some detail because I think I tried everything. I did the things that work and the things that don't work. And I also invited my readers, particularly my newsletter subscribers, to contribute their experiences if they had lost their beloveds. And I got some beautiful, beautiful experiences from them, sometimes funny anecdotes, sometimes really sad ones, some insights that were so valuable. And overall, what they conveyed to me, and which I know the book conveys to others now, is there's no one right way to get back into being sexual with yourself or with another after the profound grief that you go through. There's no time when grief is officially over,
Right.
in air quotes. There is no time when there is no right time to start dating again. It's up to you.
Yeah.
Your timeline is your own.
Right. Right. It
There are many
varies.
ways it may play out for people. Some people want to get wildly sexual, sometimes with many people, sometimes doing new things. Other people only are looking for the next love relationship, and many others are saying, "Well, yeah, I'd like to be with someone, but I don't know if I can give my heart again."
Yeah, yeah, yes. It's interesting because while while I've lost my dad in 2014, I have a lot of friends who one of their parents died, recently too, and so um, their parents, the person that's left, some of them are like, I just that I can't date anymore. That person was the only person for me. I can't even see myself, dating again or trying to be with anybody else. There are some people that are just adamant, you know, they don't want to do that anymore. And then there, like you said, then there's some that jump back out there. So it just kind of varies. And I would imagine it really, there's a process probably mentally and emotionally that you have to go through in order to really get to that point, even if you decide to get there. Would you agree?
Well, I would agree absolutely. And the book is not a workbook exactly, but it is in ways a way of working through your own plan,
Mm-hmm.
because each short chapter gives gives a section called Your Turn, which is exercises you can do or questions you can answer to figure out where you stand on the topic of that chapter.
Right. Okay. Sounds good. Well, now I want to talk about, once, 10 years, it took 10 years. And once you decided that you were ready to move back out and to do this, you sort of had a reawakening of your sexuality. Is that right? So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I went in fits and starts and stops and try agains,
Yeah.
um, because I've never quite put it that way again, but I sort of like that.
Yeah.
Um, because I knew there were times where I thought I need to be touched, and then there were times where I thought, yeah, but I don't want anyone. There's no one I know that I want to touch me.
Ah,
There was that problem. So I tried many different things. I I I opened myself up, so to speak, with a massage with benefits from a professional masseur.
oh, okay.
Uh huh. And then I had after I tried sex with an old friend that didn't work, a sex with an old friend that did work, but sort of worked. And then what worked for me very well eventually was a friend with benefits relationship with someone who had been a lover of mine many years before, maybe 15 years before.
Okay.
We knew each other, we trusted each other, and it wasn't going to go any farther than friends with benefits. That was agreed, and that's how we both felt. And we felt very lucky to have found in each other a way to experience a real friendly connection. And we laughed together, we told stories to each other, um, we enjoyed each other's company, and we got to give each other orgasms.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. And as I'm sitting here thinking and listening to you, I would imagine that because you knew that person, it probably took a lot of maybe if you didn't know that person, like it just kind of helped move things along a little better and easier for you because you already kind of knew that person. So you had a certain comfort level, I would say.
that's absolutely true. We
And
knew that the other person was telling us the truth
right.
about the emotions, about their own circumstances. Um, uh, we already had that trust built in,
Yeah.
because I tried to date new people too. I went on lots of first dates, a few second dates, and very few third dates. And occasionally a date would get sexual or start to get sexual and just wouldn't work out. And so it wasn't that this was my friend with benefits was the entire solution to the 10-year problem. He was one of the wonderful solutions towards the end of those 10 years.
Hmm.
And then, And then I met someone on OkCupid,
Okay. All right.
and and we're dating 3 years later.
Awesome. Awesome. So,
So this can happen.
yes. Okay. So, let me just ask now, the person, the friend with benefits that you already kind of knew,
Hmm.
um, that probably was a way for you to kind of get your feet wet, is what I'm thinking. And then once you got your feet wet, and then you just sort of started getting comfortable, and then you probably were able to concentrate on or know exactly what you wanted from this sexual, relationship or pleasure, or, what you're trying to get out of it. I don't know. It just seems to me that it probably made it easier for you to be able to communicate and start to feel and understand what you wanted to get out of this thing, is what I'm thinking. Am I right?
It was a wonderful way to know that I wasn't crazy and wanting the things I wanted,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because I knew what I wanted before that. And on these these dates I went on, I was very self aware and communicative,
Okay.
they just didn't work out because most first dates don't work out. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
But also, some of them didn't work out because I like this guy's brain, but I'm not attracted to him at all, or vice versa.
Right.
And and so there were just the same kinds of problems that anyone trying to find someone to date or have a new partner or become sexual with, the same problems that we all face. And yet there's this overlay, this deep blanket on top of us that says, but we're in grief. How can this ever work?
Right. So,
How can I suspend those feel? What if I start to cry if we have sex?
oh yeah.
No,
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Right. Yeah. So you made some, I'm sure you had some experiences, right? I mean, there were some good things that happened, and there was some kind of stumbles along the way, and maybe some
that's
mistakes
right.
along the way. And so, without sharing too much, because we want to get the book and we want to read some more of these things,
We
but
do.
can you just share maybe a couple of things that you learned along the way, or maybe some mistakes that happened that, just for that person that's like, I'm experiencing this. I'm a widow right now, or, I'm trying to figure out how to go about this. And, they're probably on the edge of their seat right now listening to you, Joan. Can you share a little bit, about kind of some mistakes or what you learned?
Well, I'm going to reframe it to say I learned a lot, but I didn't feel there were mistakes
Okay, sure.
because that's a sort of a way to shame ourselves. Oh, I
Yeah,
did it wrong. I shouldn't have done that.
yeah.
I never felt that. When it didn't work out, I told myself, okay, here's what I learned from this one that didn't work out.
Okay.
Here's what I learned about what I'm looking for, what I'm not, the kind of person I would be comfortable with. So it was, I, I hope I did it as well as I'm telling you I did it. It's hard to know whether I've just put it together in a different way with these years of introspection. But I do believe it worked out that way. There were times I was very discouraged. There were times that I thought, how is it that I am incapable of meeting someone who turns me on and who is a good person and who will be gentle with me at this time? And so at first I thought I just wanted to date other widowers.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was the solution, that I would only date people who had the same experience I did. And that, in a way, seemed to work, except that then I discovered that's all we had in common most of the time. That if we hadn't both been widowed, there'd be no reason for us to be dating.
Ah, okay.
you know? So I had times where I would have, these were a whole big series of first dates, where I try to find something in common to talk about, try to find a way that we would find each other attractive, and just never managed it. I do have plenty of tips of how to do that first date if you're interested.
Yes.
But I don't think any of these were mistakes. What would have been a mistake for me would be not listening to myself,
Okay.
not paying attention by saying, but listen, I was really hoping this would turn into a sex date because I haven't had sex in way too long. And so I'm just going to go through with it, even though I don't think he's the right person for me.
Oh,
Well, that wouldn't have been right.
yeah. Okay. All right. Well, now you mentioned dating or that you had something you wanted to share about first dates. And so obviously, you've said, I guess, what I've read anyway, is that there's no right or wrong way of reintroducing, sex or sexual relations back into your life. So can you share your experience then on maybe, how did you learn how to do this, or what is the right way to have first dates, or start to have sex with other, how what can you offer for people who are listening?
Yeah, I have a webinar which is based on a workshop I give called "How the Heck Do I Date at This Age?"
Yes.
And it's an hour and a half. It's a very lively webinar, or if I give it in person, a super lively 2 hours
Yeah.
where we go through all that. How do we use online dating? How do we meet people? How do we um, when do we actually meet in person, and so on. But I do have some first date tips where you don't have to
Yes.
be grieving for this to work well. That if you are meeting someone that you only know through an online dating service, you've
Hmm.
never met in person, or even if it's a blind date someone set you up with, that you make sure it has a finite time and start it in a public place. For example, a coffee shop that closes at 6. Make the date for 5 so that you have that hour of conversation, and then you don't have to figure out how do I end this date because the coffee shop is changing the sign to close and the date is over. If you
Okay.
decide that you want to have more time with this person, you can say, let's take a walk or let's go to dinner. But otherwise, it's ended for you, and you don't have to try to figure out how do I not hurt this person's feelings.
Yeah.
Another thing is to make the date to do something you would do anyway so that you don't feel the time was wasted if you don't like the person.
Good
For
strategy.
example, I love to walk, so most of my first dates I would make as walks in a park or on a trail, and I would again do it finite. I'm free from 4 to 5. Not just I'm free at 4, but I'm free from 4 to 5. You want to take a walk on the Redota Trail. So
Yeah.
then even if you decide, oh dear, I wish I hadn't even said yes to a first date with this person, that you have not wasted your time because you got your exercise. You saw some pretty scenery.
I like it. I'm following
Yeah.
it. Sounds good. Sounds
And
good.
then another tip is
Mm-hmm.
to guide the conversation, make sure it's a dialogue, not a monologue. And I find often that on first dates that the guys tend to talk too much. They are nervous when it's silent.
Yeah.
Let there be silences, everybody. Let there be silences so that you're taking in what the other person said before you respond. So it's not just okay, if you'll stop talking, I'll say what I wanted. Okay, if I stop talking, you'll say what you want.
Yes.
Let's not have it serial, uh, how do I want to say that?
Was.
Serial monologues.
Mm-hmm.
Have a dialogue instead. Does that make sense?
Yes. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
plan it that way. I once had a guy who talked all the time, all the time, all the time. And then when he finally paused for a drink of his coffee or something, I said, you haven't asked me a single question. And then just let that, then I stopped. And he went, okay.
Yeah.
What do you want me to know? No, no, no,
Oh
no.
gosh. Right.
And another time I had to say to someone, I get the impression that I could be anyone sitting here. And he took that in and said, oh my gosh, you're right. Let's start over.
Oh, good. Good.
If they don't get it, they don't get it. But
Yeah.
you've tried.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine that it's probably very, very stressful. I would think it's very, very stressful. I know it's stressful anyway, just first dates, at 30 and 40 and 20, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I would think, if they are widowed, just say for instance, and they're out on a first date, it can be kind of awkward, I bet. And they just sort of don't know, it's been so long since they've had a date or
Well,
even had to, do this. And so I bet it's just very awkward and stressful for
well,
them.
and then if we acknowledge that, it makes it easier.
Yes.
If we say, and I've certainly said this plenty of times on a date, especially if I know I'm dating a widower,
Yeah.
I'll say, isn't it weird to be trying to date again after losing a spouse? And then suddenly we're in deep conversation and it's really gratifying.
That's good.
We may not feel we want to see each other as dates, but we've had an exchange with someone who understands. And that's so important.
It is. It is. Yeah, that really is. So I don't know. And do you find that when you're out with widowers, um, do you kind of talk about your spouse that passed away? I mean, does that come up? I mean,
It has to.
yeah,
It's too artificial if it doesn't.
right.
And I think it for any people. I have a whole chapter on um, how to date a someone who is bereaved, how to date a griever. And one of the things is you let the person talk about the loved one.
Yes.
You
Acknowledge.
can't pretend you're starting from scratch and erasing that history. You
Yes.
can't be.
Yeah.
It's insulting if you try.
Right.
So if instead, and see, it goes both ways. You want to allow for talking about the deceased, but you also don't want to just do that.
Right.
You
Right.
want to keep questioning yourself. Wait, it's okay to give a story or two about my beloved, but I've been talking way too long about him, and I better stop it
Yes, you got
now.
to have some balance. Yeah, don't sit there and occupy the
Yeah.
entire date with talking about it. So yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so
And if
in
someone and to ask yourself, this is part of what happens, and I don't want to go away without including this. We can't help but be saying to ourselves, "Am I really ready to do this?" And
yeah,
you'll be saying to yourself, "Probably not," or "Yes," or "Probably not," alternating every 5 minutes. That's okay.
right. Okay. Well, now, Joan, I know that in your book, you pretty much, let's just talk about the book for a second, too, a little bit more as far as how the book is structured. So you have different stories from different seniors, is that right? Or you've got input from various different people in this book, is that correct? Where they share their
Yes,
experience? Okay.
the other people are not all seniors.
Okay.
There are more seniors than any other age group, yes, but they are not all seniors. I did that purposely. I wanted it to be mainly seniors because we have. If you've been with someone, I haven't, but for many people, if you've been with someone 40, 50 years, your experience is different than if you lost someone after 10 years or 5 years or 7. So I wanted to have that, but I also the kinds of things, that information and advice I was giving, almost all of it is useful, even if you're 30 and you lost your spouse.
Right. Okay. So it could be
So
anybody can, yeah.
it's set up with 15, 6, 17, sorry, 17 short chapters. And then within the chapters, there is my journey and advice from experts if that fits, and lots of excerpts from other grievers' experiences.
Okay.
That's how the book is set up.
Okay. So eventually, then, you go through the grieving process. In your case, it was about 10 years, but of course, I'm sure it comes and goes. I mean, there's no ending point for grief. I mean, it just can
No, there
continue.
isn't.
Um, but then you made a decision to go out on dates and kind of starting to reintroduce, um, you know, sex and all of that and getting involved. And
Well,
so,
you make that decision at any point.
right,
You don't have to think you're done with grief because you're not.
right, that's what I thought. Yeah.
This can happen at any point when you feel that it would be helpful to you to be touched again.
Yes. So why does it matter then to take care of yourself sexually when actually, you know, you might still be grieving or you might still, just really feel sad. But so why does it matter to continue to take care of yourself sexually and not just say, I'm done with it?
Well, that's a good question. There are a couple of reasons. One is sex feels good and it's good for us, and it's a natural antidepressant.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm talking about sex we can give ourselves, not just partnered sex, but
Okay.
solo sex also,
Okay.
because that's really the first stage, I think, of getting back to our sexuality. But then another part of it is that we are sexual beings and we are resilient beings. Even though it seems like we can never be resilient when we're in the middle of grief, it turns out with time we are. And so by acknowledging the signs of that, whether it's just a tingle or a quiver of erotic possibility, even if we don't want to do anything about it, acknowledging, oh, I have the capability of feeling sexual again. Who knew? That that's an important part of being human.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And so you mentioned solo sex and that maybe was that sort of the first sort of start to this, and what did you use or what how did you kind of get comfortable with solo sex before moving out with sex with another individual?
Well, I had always been comfortable with solo sex. I have had an array of sex toys and had always enjoyed those. And for quite a while after Robert died, I was numb. I didn't feel any sexual need or desire or interest. I just felt numb. My mind and my body were numb.
Yeah.
And in fact, I said to my grief counselor at that time, I've got all these sex toys, but I don't even know if it would work.
Right.
And she said, if you've got the right vibrator, it'll work. And so I said, well, all righty, I'll take that as a challenge.
It's
By gum, she was right.
and yeah, and so you used it, and then it was like that was kind of like, oh, okay, this
Yeah.
does still
Well,
feel,
it
yeah.
wasn't all that easy. Yes, my body responded.
Yeah. Okay.
My brain was still saying, but Robert's dead.
Grief, yeah. Yeah, the
Hmm.
pain, yeah.
So there were times when I, I would be sexual with myself and reach the intended goal and then just burst into tears.
Oh, yes. My
And I
gosh.
said to myself, well, does that mean I stop doing this or does that mean I keep doing this? And I said, Joan, you burst into tears, whatever is going on. So you might as well have orgasms first.
Okay. All right. Now, one more question because, there could be somebody listening who, I'm going to tell you, there are some people that maybe, ever since high school, they were with their spouse. I mean, they got
Yeah.
married maybe very early. I have
Hmm.
an aunt who now is a widow, but she got married at like maybe, I think, I want to say 18 or 19. And he was all she knew. And I doubt very
Yeah.
seriously, maybe she didn't have sex toys at that time. And I don't know. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But, my point is that all she knew basically was him. And there could be somebody out there that really, this is
Sure.
totally new. Like, I mean, not only
Sure.
having sex with somebody else, but maybe they haven't even experienced sex toys before. So before we
Hmm.
go, can you kind of share maybe a sex toy that they can use that can maybe help them to sort of get used to the pleasure without a partner first before
But
moving.
there's
Yeah.
no one toy that will
Yeah.
work the best for everyone.
Right.
In fact, on my blog, which you can find from joanprice.com, the tabs across the top one will say blog. I review sex toys from a senior perspective.
Okay.
I've been doing that for 10 years, and I
Great.
have more than 100 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I would suggest that someone who's never used sex toys could start reading some of those reviews and see what is appealing. Because there's so many questions to ask yourself about just what do you want the sex toy to do and where do you want it to do it. What part of you do you want stimulated and how? There's no one answer. but there's certainly plenty of possibilities, and some of them are fabulous.
Okay. And
I would also say to someone who is trying to come back, or even asking after listening to this, do I even want to think about this after losing my partner of so many years? You're not trying to replace your partner. You're not. It can't be done anyway, but that's not the goal. And so don't feel that you would be betraying your partner if you ended up with someone new. Also realize that if you had been able to ask your partner ahead of time, what do you want to have happen if you die before me? I'll bet that partner would have said, please find joy.
yes, continue to live, have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're gone, but that doesn't mean that they think that your life should be over. You know, they're no longer here, but they want you to continue to live and enjoy your life. Yeah. Okay. So, Joan, let's just say, tell the listeners again, we did this on part one. Let's make sure that they know how to hear more from you, how to read more of your articles, how to see your videos, how to see your webinars, all of that.
Go to joanprice.com. That's www.joanprice.com. You'll see tabs across the top for all the different things I do, and you can explore all of that. I have free senior sex tips. I have lots of information. There are descriptions of all my books and my webinars and live events if I'm doing any near you. And I'm so happy that I got to talk to you, Tina, and to this new audience. I really appreciate that.
Yes, yes, I am too. Thank you so much. You are so fabulous, Joan, and
Thank you, Tina.
just wonderful to talk to, and such a great educator. And I just love listening to your experience. And I know that there are a lot of women out there that, and men, who can totally relate to your journey and where you've been, and they're continuing to try and move beyond and continue to nurture themselves sexually, date, and just continue to live. So I really, really thank you again for being on the Lovers Lounge with me. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure, Tina. Thank you.
All right. Well, you guys, this wraps up another episode of the Lovers Lounge, where we, of course, talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. Of course, if you have enjoyed this show, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and give some comments. That helps me to know, whether or not I should do particular shows or not, or who knows, maybe it'll keep me around a little longer. I am your host, Tina Love, and until next time, peace. And of course, don't you forget, love